Um, Hi, welcome. This is the Trenton Broadband Committee's second Internet Literacy Training presentation. I'm Rick Palazzolo, a member of our town's Broadband Committee, and we had to make a change in scheduling because the airlines rebooked our scheduled presenter's flights, and she's not back in town yet and can't be here with us today. So John Whetstone has stepped up and is going to do his introductory presentation on the equipment that we use to connect to broadband service in Trenton. Before that, the committee wishes to acknowledge and thank the Maine Community Foundation for their grant award supporting our broadband literacy training efforts, and John for stepping up for today's presentation in Diane's absence. Before I introduce John, the Broadband Committee member Saul Goldman will share a few tips on our Zoom meeting participation. Saul?
He's muted.
You're still muted.
You're probably familiar with Zoom, as well as the constant refrain, "You're muted." It's happened to all of us. Anyway, we do ask, if you're watching, to stay muted, until we get to questions. Also, if you're comfortable, to stay on the video. We're not a big group, and so it's more like being in person. If you're comfortable doing that. John Whetstone's going to be presenting about spectrum and about broadband generally. You may have questions, and so it's a slideshow on PowerPoint. At the end of each slide, if you've got questions, John welcomes those questions. There are a bunch of ways to ask them, whatever you're most comfortable with. You can ask a question by physically raising your hand. You can ask a question by on your menu at the bottom, going to reactions. And one of the things you can do under reactions is to raise your hand electronically. And you can also, if you wish, under chat, which is also at the bottom, you can put a question into the chat. Whichever of those is most comfortable for you, feel free to do that. I don't think there's anything. And then if you have questions, if you're having trouble, you can just put things in the chat, and we can respond to that without interrupting John. I think that's it. Back to you, Rick.
All right, and I left out one thing. The Broadband Committee does have a YouTube channel now, and that is where we will post this and the other recordings of these presentations and the questions and answers. And in the chat window, I've posted the URL to that channel. Thank you. Not current on all my terminology. Okay, so without further ado, our presenter today is town resident John Whetstone. John is a communication systems engineer going back to the early 70s. In his long career, he's had various positions, including things like Chief Technology Officer, Chief Engineer, VP and General Manager, Executive Vice President, and Principal Engineer. John has designed, developed, and managed sophisticated satellite ground systems for major communication and satellite companies during the past several decades. He was an independent contractor consultant on large projects for major companies, including Norsat International, the Red Cross, PBS, as well as the FBI and military branches. So John has extensive technical experience, and he's going to give us an introduction to our hardware.
Yes, thank you, Rick. I will mention that I am not an IT expert. My background has been mainly in satellite telecommunications, and obviously, as part of that, we've had to connect into various things for video and audio and so on. So I have moved into knowing what IT is all about, but I am by no means a veritable expert in that. Today, we're going to talk about the service, primarily Spectrum, although I will touch on other possible services as well. So to begin, what is broadband? Broadband is high-speed internet access that is always on. Now, I know, and I'll bring it up during this meeting or the presentation, that Spectrum, when power goes out, so does Spectrum. So, it's not always on. There are ways to do that, but that basically it's not dial-up. It's always connected through, and you can use it with your cell phones or your computers and so on. There's a standard that was voiced by the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, that broadband would be a minimum of 25 megabits download and 3 megabits upload speeds. The Department of the Treasury's interim final rule defines unserved and underserved households or businesses to mean one or more households or businesses that are not currently served by a wireline, i.e. cable connection, that reliably delivers at least 25 megabits download speeds and 3 megabits upload. As part of the American Rescue Plan Act, the IFR requires eligible broadband projects to have a capacity to deliver minimum speeds of 100 megabits download and 100 megabits upload. What they're striving for is connections which we've not realized at this point of the same speed upload as we have for download. And that's primarily utilized when you're doing telemedicine, gaming, and so on, would require that type of upload speeds. Now, they go on to say in this IFR that in cases where it is impractical due to geography, topography, or financial cost to meet these standards, projects must reliably deliver at least 100 megabits download and at least 20 megabits upload speeds and be scalable to a minimum of the 100 megabits and upload and download. In discussions with Spectrum, they have told us that their system is scalable at some future time to be capable of the 100 megabits in both directions, but currently they're not. Now, recently, Spectrum, as of March 1st, they've upgraded from 100 megabits download standard to 200 megabits, but they've maintained the same upload speed of 10 megabits per second. So I don't know if they're moving to do the 20 megabits at some future point, but that is possible. Any questions on that?
John, I've actually got a question. I've turned off, so I wanted to get, I've got Spectrum. I've wanted to get 200. We were getting 100 megabits upload. I turned off my modem. I turned it back on, and it didn't make any difference. Do you know whether there? I'm sort of on an outlying point in Trenton, so it looks like they didn't upgrade our point. And I haven't had a chance to contact them yet. Do you know if they've done the upgrade to 200 just on the main roads, or have you heard anyone else?
You're actually on a main road because you're right off of Route 3, and there's no more main road in Trenton than Route 3. So I don't understand why you would not be upgraded to 200. And that's something to call Spectrum and find out what they plan to do.
Yeah.
But everybody that I've talked to so far on the broadband committee has the 200. So, and I think, we had a power failure along Oak Point, and I'm other places, and that power failure would have caused everybody's modem to reset. So everybody should have come up after that power failure at 200, hopefully. But that we're putting it out there that it should be 200 at this point in Trenton. That's what we were told.
Is a follow-up question on that, John. Is it possible that the cable modem maxes out at 100?
That's a setting that Spectrum is able to control.
Okay.
And supposedly they've changed that setting and it requires. But as I say, I think the best thing is for Saul to call Spectrum and then report back to us, see what you found. But so far, we've had no problems with the 200. Everybody in this room, I believe, Rachel, do you have 200?
Did not test it yet.
Uh-oh. Okay. Available internet access services. The ability to connect to the internet using computers and other devices. You can do it via cellular by creating a mobile hotspot. There are several people that, because they didn't have Spectrum service, were able to do this through their cellular network supplier. Saul has had DSL, which is very slow. That is not available in all areas of Trenton. It was available along Route 3, but in checking, it's not available along Bayside or Oak Point. So that even that lower grade of service is not available. Cable would be Spectrum. They do offer high-speed internet available to most homes, and I've got another slide which addresses what we've done on that. Consolidated Communications does have fiber along Route 3, and we have at least one business that is using their high-speed fiber, and they like it. I don't know what the cost of those are compared to what Spectrum offers. Then there's satellite services. Starlink is the newest one to come online. They're still in the beta test phase. The equipment cost is $499 plus $50 shipping and handling. And then the service offering is $99 per month for 100 to 200 megabits. Although in a recent article that is in Ellsworth American, there are people reporting that they have speeds over the 200 megabits, but that may be due just because there are not very many people on it yet, because they're still in the test phase. They do offer a premium service, which would be probably for businesses. The equipment is $2,500 and then $500 a month for 150 to 500 megabits per second. There are two other satellite providers. I didn't provide details because I personally do not recommend either one of them, but Viasat does offer service, as does HughesNet. We have one of our members had HughesNet, and it was pretty abysmal. And my experience with Hughes using them for government projects has not been very good. So at this point, Spectrum is primarily what is available in Trenton. We, back in June of 2021, the Broadband Committee began a study to identify the Trenton roads without broadband cable service. And this resulted in the following list. There are a few of them that have just one lot that's served, or one residence. But that list, developing that list then resulted in a contract with Spectrum to provide service to all of these roads. Woodland Drive was one that, because of the number of people living on that road, Spectrum will do that, but at no cost to the town. They're doing that themselves. So we did develop a contract earlier I don't know exactly the status of when those people will be connected, but that will be paid for out of ARPA funds. It wasn't very much. It was under $40,000 that the town used out of ARPA funds, and then Spectrum matched that. So basically now, one of the things that was different, I know if you've read in the papers and on the internet, there are surrounding towns. One of the ones was Blue Hill Peninsula, where they've entered into a contract with a company that actually is part of Consolidated Communications, and they will be doing fiber direct to home. And so they will be able to offer the higher speeds and the symmetrical speeds to the homes within that area. And the cost is reasonable. It's in, the same cost area that we are with Spectrum, under $100 a month. Now, and those of the funding for that, they've used some Connect ME funds for that. Trenton, we looked at that, and unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we had very good coverage from Spectrum. Right out of the gate, we had very good service, or maybe not good service, but at least service to the majority of the residences within Trenton. And that meant that when we looked at a Connect ME grant or funding from them, it really wasn't reasonable to do that. Because we had so many people in Trenton already serviced. So a lot of the things that you'll read about these other surrounding towns, which had virtually no service, they've started out fresh. They've been able to go fiber optic direct to the home. They've been able to get grant money. They've also entered into the town being responsible for a large amount of that. So they've done long-term loans and so on. We've not had to do that in Trenton at all. But we are stuck with Spectrum, I guess. It was advantageous for us to just move forward with these, providing Spectrum to these roads and moving forward with that. Any questions on that?
One quick clarification on that is that for these roads that will be served, we are not paying for the home to connect itself to the Spectrum service. That we left up to the individual homeowners on if they chose to. What we are doing with the contract is making it available. So many of these homes had received quotes of many $1,000s to even have access to that Spectrum, to get Spectrum to run the cable. So the contract will run the cable, but the actual connection to the home will be up to the homeowners themselves.
But my understanding on that is that there will be no cost to the homeowner for that connection. That Spectrum has agreed that they will provide the cable because they're running the cable down the road, and so it's just a connection from the home out to where that pole is on the road.
Yes, that is.
So it should not be any additional cost to the homeowner for that.
Yep. And then the homeowners.
Except for the monthly fee.
The homeowners will incur the monthly fee of the service like everyone.
Okay, Spectrum cable service, which most of the people have. I've found that in not all cases are the people happy with it. They're not getting the speeds that they should be getting. If you're not completely satisfied with your Spectrum cable service, we are a resource that can help you with that. One of the first things that you can do is run an internet speed test to determine if you're getting the expected service. And I would caution you, when you do that test, you really need to connect directly to your Wi-Fi router using an Ethernet cable. All of the Wi-Fi routers have anywhere from 2 to 4, in some cases more, Ethernet connections. you need to plug your laptop or your other computer into that connection and run the speed test from there. The reason for that is if you're running the speed test over Wi-Fi, particularly the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi degrades a fair amount due to distance. So the further you're away from your Wi-Fi router, the slower that connection speed will be. And you should be aware of that in where you place your Wi-Fi router and so on. But this is a test, just www.speedtest.net. It's very easy to do. And that will indicate if you're getting the either 100 megabits or now the 200 megabits download speed and 10 megabit upload speeds. Generally, you will see speeds just slightly in excess of that, both uplink and downlink. And again, if you are finding that your speeds are consistently lower than what you expect, you should call Spectrum and have them either replace equipment or come out and check your service, replace cable and so on, whatever it takes. But don't hesitate to call Spectrum if you're not getting the service that you expect. And again, I point out that when the Versant power goes out, so does Spectrum service almost immediately. And in some cases, you may, just depending on the routing of the Spectrum cable and where it's getting its power from, you may lose your electric service, but not lose Spectrum. But generally, you're going to lose Spectrum when that power goes out. Any questions on this slide? Okay. Many of the customers in Trenton have had cable service and they initially purchased it through Time Warner Cable. And so they're considered a Time Warner Cable legacy customer. And because of that, they may not have contracted for, or probably didn't contract for 100 megabit service because that was not available through Time Warner Cable. And generally the maximum you could get from Time Warner Cable was 30 megabits with an upload speed of 5 megabits. And that actually was considered a premium service at the time. But if you are consistently seeing speeds that are below or are right around 30 megabits or lower, then you're probably a Time Warner Cable legacy customer. And there are people that I've talked to that are quite happy with still staying a Time Warner Cable legacy customer. You are getting your bill through Spectrum because Spectrum actually purchased Time Warner Cable. So the bill will say Spectrum on it. That's not a good indication of whether you either are or are not a Time Warner Cable legacy customer. The speed test is what's going to really show whether you are or not. And it's then up to you whether the price that you're getting from Spectrum being, having the lower speeds is adequate for what you're using it for, and so on. Now, when I was a Time Warner Cable legacy customer, when I called, I guess we're in a good mood that day. They said, we can't get, I called because I was actually getting lower than 30 megabits and was told that because I had, in order to avoid the $10 monthly charge, I had purchased my own cable modem. And because of that, I was told that Spectrum would not guarantee even the 30 megabits per second speeds. But if I changed over to becoming a Spectrum customer, they would provide a free cable modem, and they would then provide 100 megabit service. And it actually cost me $40 less per month to become a Spectrum customer. But I've seen that that's not always the case, depending upon what the bill is, whether you have additional services such as their the Spectrum TV service, phone, and so on, they'll do special pricing. So you need to call Spectrum and find out what your cost would be if you became a Spectrum customer. And one of the other things is that, and I'll go through this in the next presentation that I do, there is always a $5 monthly charge for the Wi-Fi router, whether it's integrated into the cable modem or it's a separate unit. If it is provided by Spectrum, there is a $5 monthly charge for that. Any questions on this slide? What an easy audience. Spectrum pricing, when you initially become a Spectrum customer, the cost is $49.99 per month. That will last for the first 12 months. And then it will go up, at this point, it will go up in increments of $10 per month each year. And that, as of now, is for the 200 megabit download and 10 megabit upload speeds, which is their new standard. You can upgrade from that to 400 megabits, which they consider their Internet Ultra, for an additional $20 per month. And that stays the same $20. It's not dependent on where you are in the tiered initial buy-in for the 200 megabits. So if you're at, as I am, I'm up at the highest for the 200 of $79.99 per month. If I would want to buy the upgrade to 400 megabits, that would still be an additional $20 per month. I did check about a month ago, and they offer what they call the Internet Gig service, which is 1 gigabit or 1,000 megabits at an additional $60 per month. Saul triggered he saw it for an additional $40 per month. And I went on their website, and for Bayside, where I am, they don't offer it anymore. So I don't know what is going on here, but you need to, if you want the higher speed, call Spectrum and find out, do they offer it, and what is the additional cost per month. All of the plans that Spectrum offers now do include the cable modem at no additional cost. But the Wi-Fi router is $5 per month. And the phone number there is for Spectrum sales to contact for any of these issues. Any questions?
I have
Yes,
one.
Saul.
Do you think it's true, John, that if you're paying on the even dollar, like $50, $60, $70 a month, you're not being charged that extra $5 a month for the router? But if you're paying $55, $65, $75, this is just for internet service, then you probably are being charged the extra $5 a month for the router?
Yes. The other thing is you can look at the breakdown of your bill, and it will have that listed separately on your bill. There's the first page of the bill where the pricing is. They will tell you what the overall cost is. But if you drill down a couple of pages, it will show, it'll delineate that you're paying an additional $4.99 or $5. They claim that it's now an even $5 per month for the Wi-Fi router. And Rachel, you had.
Yeah, I just realized you may be covering this one in the last slide, but I think one of the most helpful things that you explained to me before is the difference between a modem and a router.
Next month.
Okay.
But I'll at least show it in the drawing that I have.
Thank you.
And I can explain that to some extent. Okay, and here it is. Your Spectrum coaxial cable comes in, and that's a round cable with a single connection that screws into the cable modem. The cable modem needs to have that cable connected to it and power. And that's all it needs. It doesn't radiate anything. So it can be mounted in the basement. It can be mounted anywhere that's convenient out of the way. Then to connect to a Wi-Fi router, if it's a separate unit from the cable modem, there's an Ethernet cable to go to the Wi-Fi router. And one of the advantages of having them separate is it's a lot easier and less expensive to run an Ethernet cable from the cable modem to the Wi-Fi router, which would enable you to place the Wi-Fi router in an optimum location within your home to get higher speed service from the RF part of that Wi-Fi router. But if they're integrated, then it's a single power connection to this integrated cable modem / Wi-Fi router. And the disadvantage of that is that that would restrict where the Wi-Fi router can be routed or can be located based on where the spectrum coaxial cable comes into your home. And in a lot of cases that comes in a basement location, and having the Wi-Fi router in the basement is certainly not an optimum location. Now, out of the Wi-Fi router, there are can be direct connections, which again is an Ethernet cable to your computer or your television or whatever else. You can directly connect your laptop into that and other devices. The reason for doing that, the advantage of doing that is that you're then, the highest speed can be realized at your computer, for instance, or your television, because you're not over Wi-Fi. You would not be driven by the loss of signal strength to those devices. The cable would give you the highest speed. I also show on the drawing that if you have Spectrum phone service, that is another direct connection out of the cable modem. The cable modems from Spectrum do offer a single Ethernet port out of them, and also a telephone port or two out of them. Any questions on this? Any questions at all, since this is the last slide?
You had talked about the integrated unit needing to be where the cable comes in. And one of the things we had done was extend that cable by patching that and bringing it up to the middle of the house.
Yeah, Jim has also done that.
Yeah, but if you want to make sure you get good quality
But it's,
cable.
yeah, it's actually harder to run that coaxial cable with the F connectors on it than it is to run an Ethernet cable. And more expensive. Ethernet cable is certainly less costly than coaxial cable.
Can you talk a little bit about why you made those decisions when you were talking about running yours?
You had an integrated unit.
I had an integrated unit at the time, and to put it down in the basement would have
Killed your
yeah.
Wi-Fi.
We may have had Wi-Fi on the first floor. We wouldn't have had it up on the second floor.
Yeah.
So we ran the coaxial cable all the way to the living room.
And you've also run one of the Ethernet ports out of the Wi-Fi router up to your computer on the second floor. So you've not taken a hit with the degradation of the Wi-Fi signal between the two floors.
Yeah. Even the lower 2.4.
4 gigahertz, yes.
2.4 gigahertz falls off at that far corner of the house. And the
Yes.
5 is almost gone. By the
Yep.
time I get out that far, I can't get the 5. So
In the next presentation, I have a list of the things to avoid when you're placing the Wi-Fi router. Steel and concrete are Wi-Fi's enemies.
well, I'm in a cape and the chimney is dead center of the house. So
So,
unless I do Wi-Fi extender, so I have Wi-Fi at both ends of the house. I have the chimney blocking some direction.
Okay. Star, you had a
Yeah,
question?
so I have a question about, so when we lose power, I have a generator. So I
Doesn't-
know it doesn't make a difference, that I know. Is there ever going to become a time, because we lose power, especially in the summer months, we lose it quite frequently? Is there ever going to be a time when that, or how would that be that when you lose power, you would not lose Wi-Fi or broadband?
That is strictly a Spectrum issue, and in all of the discussions we've had with Spectrum, they have indicated no desire to provide any kind of backup to the power needed for their amplifiers that are along the roads and connect into their cable. So that's a problem. When the power goes out, they have no cable and no power in those or to those large gray boxes that are mounted on the power poles along the roads. And therefore, the amplifiers that are powered by those gray boxes, the power goes away, and therefore you totally lose the signal.
And fiber, would fiber?
Still, fiber still has amplifiers. The
Okay.
Spectrum service to Trenton is a hybrid network where you have fiber along the major roads, and then connected into that is coaxial cable that runs down the side roads or directly to the homes, for instance, along Bayside or along Route 3.
Okay, thank you.
And one of the things, that is an advantage. If you absolutely have to have internet connectivity, then you would go to a satellite system, which is what I've done throughout my career, is provided uninterrupted connectivity, for instance, for the Red Cross. When I did a satellite network for them, that was the reason. When they went out to do a disaster recovery operation, in one case, when one of the first ones that we deployed the new satellite system for was in Virginia, with a flood, and the central office, the central telephone office was underwater. So there was no terrestrial connectivity whatsoever. And satellite was the way to connect. And that's where satellite still, is a possibility for people who are in either extremely rural areas where it would still be costly to run Spectrum cable or fiber optic cable.
So as a follow-up to that, are you saying Starlink might provide that uninterrupted service?
Yes. So for somebody who is either very remote or needs to have full-time connectivity, Starlink would be an alternative for that.
Do people ever do a hybrid where they do Spectrum and Starlink?
If you want to pay for it, you certainly can do it.
So
All it costs is money.
Yeah, I'm assuming if I did full-time telemedicine, then I would be.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think the practitioners that I'm using telemedicine with have satellite links. So if power's out or the internet is down for them, then we can't hold our sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it depends probably a little bit on how much of a priority it is to have the service at the scheduled times.
And Trenton is in a very ideal area because Ellsworth is one of the locations where what's called the three-ring binder terminates or goes through Ellsworth. So when Spectrum connects into the internet backbone, they're connecting in at Ellsworth. So
Nice.
we have very, very good internet connectivity because that major fiber optic network called the three-ring binder actually goes through Ellsworth. And before even Time Warner and so on, there was a major fiber optic going out to along Route 3 to Jackson Labs. And because, you know, the 3-ring binder connected in Ellsworth, that's where Jackson Labs connected into. So they have extremely high-speed internet because of that. Any more questions?
Was a follow-up to that, because I know that we have some Jackson Lab people who are on the, you know, on the link with us. You know, I'm just sort of surprised. I mean, like if they don't have satellite connectivity, I mean, you could conceivably lose power for several days at a time.
Yeah, I'm would be almost certain that the losing Versant power along Route 3 would not cause an outage to Jackson Labs. I think what they've done, they've probably provided some battery backup if they have fiber optic amplifiers and so on, repeaters along Route 3. It'd be interesting to find out what they've done.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder if Diane would be knowledgeable about that. It's not her area, but
She probably
she's
would
in the
know
IT
somebody.
department.
Yeah.
And I know she's been involved in the disaster recovery too, from, if nothing else, from the security point of view.
Right.
So she's part of those conversations. Interesting question to ask her.
Okay, if there's nothing else.
Hey, I was just going to say, I understand that one of the problems with Starlink is because they don't have a full complement of satellites up yet. So if you are on Starlink, you as the satellites go around, you have these little gaps in your connection. So
there are several types of satellites. There are, and Starlink is what's considered a low Earth orbit satellite. Other satellites which are in geostationary orbit, the satellites are fixed with relation to the rotation of the Earth. There's one location above the Earth at 22,300 miles above the equator. If you launch a satellite and put it into that orbit, and you do station keeping to keep it within a very tight box, you can have a fixed satellite antenna which will receive and transmit signals to that satellite, and they remain fixed. The Starlink satellites are low Earth orbit, and so they're rotating around the Earth. They're constantly rotating. Because of that, that's why they've launched thousands of these satellites, and they follow each other around the Earth, and they hand off when one satellite has connectivity to your Earth station at home. As it moves, you'll lose that connectivity, but the next one will pick up, and the first one will hand off that connection to the next one. So it's fairly a complicated system, and it's exactly as you say, Saul, is that because they initially didn't have enough of them, there were drops in connectivity because there wasn't the next satellite, there was none there to hand off to. So it'd have to wait until the next one came along and was in view of your Earth station from home. But my understanding from the write-up that was in the recent Ellsworth American is that the people are fairly satisfied with it and only see minor dropouts at this point because of that. And as they launch additional satellites, that will completely go away. There should be no loss in connectivity. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Sure.
Thank you.
And hopefully next month, Diane will be
Is
available.
that what
again.
the schedule is? Is
We
she
have
doing
not-
April?
Oh, no, wait a
we
minute.
can-
I'm sorry. Diane is away next
Yeah,
month.
I think I do the next one in
Yes.
April.
Okay, so John will be back for the second half of his presentation next month, and we will be working with Diane to get her 2 remaining presentations on cybersecurity on the schedule.
Stay tuned.
Yep.
Thank you for reminding me. I keep forgetting that. she
Yeah, it's
told
pretty
us in
sure.
advance April
And that
was out.
next one is this one. It's on the equipment that's used. So everything that's included in this slide, I will go through: cable modem, Wi-Fi router, where to place them, what the different Wi-Fi bands are, and advantages and disadvantages of them, and so on. So that is next month.
And we will post these on Facebook and again, try to get them on WERU and other platforms as well.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.